All right. Good night.
Good
Good
night.
evening.
Goodbye. Take care.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Talk Openly. My name is Jack, and I'm here with my lovely Sangha friend Daniel. Hey, Daniel.
Howdy, Jack. Nice to see you. Hello, everybody
Nice
out
to
there
see
in Talk
you.
Openly land.
Yeah, welcome everybody. Yeah, tonight we're going to be talking a little bit about our own experiences with entering the Buddhist path and taking refuge, because there's a refuge ceremony coming up on Sunday at Lions Roar Dharma Center. So we wanted to share a little bit of our own experiences and yeah, offer a little bit of what we've kind of discovered on that journey. And I think it's somewhat of an ongoing journey, don't you think, Daniel?
There's
Taking refuge.
there's no thinking about it. There's no doubt about it that it's a journey that I think is going to continue to unfold for a very long time.
Yeah, for sure. So we're gonna do that in a little bit, but yeah, I want to check in with you. What's your training like? What you been up to?
My training's good. My training's really good. I continue to put into practice some of what we learned at our retreat not too long ago. And that's been really quite wonderful to see it all, see that unfold. Most notably, it's been really cool a lot of times for my shamatha, not always, but quite frequently I'll do the Tara mantra on the out breath, right? As Lama had
Mm,
taught us. And I find it's exceptional.
mm,
It's given new meaning to the calm abiding aspect of shamatha.
mm.
Yeah, there
So
there
a lot of
really
calm.
yeah, there's a lot of well, it's the calming that comes with that sort of intentional release. It's just focusing on the breath alone, whether it's on in or out or both. That certainly has been helpful over the years. In this case, by combining it with a mantra, it really helps me to stay focused, right? And to stay concentrated and to not veer off too much. And what I notice is this deepening through the entire sit, right? It gets, like it starts, I'm kind of like, I can feel sort of the tenseness, I can feel the energy, sort of heightened energy or the dullness, right? Either one, but I can feel it and I can see that sort of just stabilize and kind of get
Mm,
like modulated over the course of the practice. So that's been
hmm.
really quite wonderful. And in terms of uh, other stuff going on, I was curious, did I mention last week the thing about dogs being dumped?
You did. Yes, you
Okay, I thought so. I thought I did.
did.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
tell us an up.
that was a bit of a fiasco. But it's all whatever. Everything's taken care of there. So then tonight I'm
Yeah.
on my way over back to the house to do the show. And my daughter and I come across, we almost run over a turtle. Uh-oh. Am I losing you? It seems like maybe the internet connection's not very good.
Are you serious?
Yeah, yeah, there we go. There we
I
go.
can hear you.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I heard about the turtle.
yeah. So I almost run over this turtle. So I pull over, I run out, grab the turtle, and I'm like, oh no, not again. Somebody put a pet turtle on the side of the road. But it turns out, no, a little bit further down the road, there was a turtle that didn't make it. And I got out to look at it. I thought, this is the strangest thing. What's going on with turtles on this busy road? And I could see actually that turtle had had eggs. And then I was like, it's turtle mating season, I guess. And that's what they were up to. They were moving across this busy road. Anyway, long story short, it's a invasive species in California. I did take it back to where I thought it came from. Normally, that's not the thing to do with a turtle that's crossing the road. Normally, you just help them across the road, right? But there
Mm,
was nothing on the other side of the road, and it wasn't going to make it. There was no chance it was going to make it across this road. So
yeah.
I just took it back down to this little pond where I know it came from. And even though it's an invasive species, I figured it's all right. It was already there. I didn't introduce it. So
Yeah.
it added a little bit of excitement to the evening.
That is so interesting. I wonder what's going on with you and animals.
I don't know, but since last week, okay, get this, not just the turtles, but I came across two more like runaway dogs,
Oh my
right?
God.
Yeah, I have no idea what's going on there, but I couldn't actually help them. They ended up continuing to run both of them down busy roads, and
Yeah.
there was not much I could do, but thankfully I didn't see them get squished or anything. So I think
Yeah.
hopefully they're okay. But yeah, I think it's just spring fever.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe so.
Yeah.
And you know, I think our training does open us up to different circumstances where we have to help, you know?
I think so too, Jack. I think what happens is, I actually talked to some other people who were like, "No, I wouldn't, why, don't mess around with it. Like, don't,
Mm,
don't even get involved, right? Just keep going." And I don't think I can do that. Like,
yeah.
yeah, I think that's the opening up, right? Like, I feel like I have to do something if I can.
Yeah. Nice work. Yeah,
Yeah,
I recently had an experience where I was waiting for a bus and I saw this worm kind of like moving towards the path of the bus. And I was like, I should go move the worm.
yeah,
And then I didn't. And I felt really bad about it. You know, I was like thinking about the worm like every so often throughout the day.
yeah.
And then got dropped off at the same spot and just kind of like checked out. Like, do I see any traces of worms? And it looked like maybe they were okay. Who knows? Maybe a bird came down and swooped it up. But
Mhm.
um, yeah, I think about that often. There was actually this a couple weeks where walking in like very urban, like densely urban streets of Seattle, like not even lots of trees around in this area. There were tons of little worms like on the sidewalk for like a couple
Mhm.
weeks. And so like because I had this like guilt about the other worm and the bus, I kept trying to move like these like little worms and get them off the sidewalk. And man, it was just like, you know, every couple steps you could move a worm, right? So I was
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I can't spend my
Mm.
whole walk moving worms. I got to get down to the ferry, you
Well,
know?
not only that, but there is sort of this question about interfering,
Right.
right,
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
whatever it is that they're up to. Like even today, I was like, I knew that the whole thing with the turtle. I'm like, I know I'm not supposed. You're supposed to just help them along, right? Like they're
Yeah.
going in a particular direction for a reason, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. And so, like, are we helping? Are we harming?
Right.
Sometimes it's not that clear, right? I think that sometimes
Oh,
there's definitely a call to some type of action in the case of, snails and worms and stuff on the sidewalks. Maybe it's just best just to do your best to avoid smushing them.
totally. Yeah. No, I think you're right. And that's a really good question that we should be thinking about all the time, right? When we're engaging in helpful activity, is like what actually is helpful. And
Yeah,
take and part so much of that is like taking our self-centered self out of the picture if we can, or doing our
that's
best
right.
to do that. Because
Exactly.
like
And
so
to
much
it,
of it
right.
is saviorism, right?
That's right, exactly.
Yeah.
Like avoid like so that's a question that I was asking myself recently with all these dogs and stuff. I was like, "Oh, am I somehow creating an identity of like Daniel is an animal rescuer?" And like no, 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 I'm
Yeah.
not. The universe, I'm not here to rescue animals or anything, Like I'll try to help if I can, but
Yeah, totally. And
yeah,
it sounds like, yeah, you especially with the, you know, was it hamsters or guinea
guinea pigs.
like being in the middle of the road, like that's a very obvious, like, okay, yeah, you got to get them out of the road, right? If you can.
Yeah.
So yeah, nice.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so what about you? How's life and how's practice?
Life is good. Life is dynamic.
No kidding.
There's always something new, right? Um, but no, things are going well. I actually I took the 8 Mahayana precepts yesterday morning.
Yeah.
And because it was the new moon. It was also the solar eclipse. And so it felt like a somewhat auspicious time to take the 8 Mahayana precepts. And those precepts are so they're the five, and I might be wrong about this, but they're the five lay people precepts, right? And then there's a few more. And one of them is like not sitting or sleeping on like a high bed with pride. Another is like not wearing kind of like ornamented things, like not perfumes or like jewelry or makeup and stuff like that. And the other one is not eating at inappropriate times. And so you're kind of taking like monastic vows for a day. Oh, and no sexual contact. And all of those are for 24 hours. Um, and it's so interesting. Every time I do this, I'm like, wow, how much just attachment um just forms my day.
Yeah.
Like it's almost like my whole day is attachment based. And of course the one that always like is so very evident is the food one. um
Yeah.
so I had my oatmeal in the morning, and then after that I didn't eat for 24 hours. And this time, I would say the last few times I've done the precepts, I've been pretty like good at being like, this is for the benefit of all beings, like reminding myself of that, like when I feel hunger, like, take on the hunger of all others, um, and really use this as like a way to train my mind. Whereas I felt something about yesterday, I was just a little bit like weird.
Oh, yeah.
I was having a weird day, and time was totally warped.
Mm.
And uh you can have like beverages just as long as it's not like milk or like juice with pulp. Um and so I was like pounding tea like all day. I got a Gatorade and was just like, yeah, like chugging Gatorade. And it was like I was doing harm reduction all day, which is like, this approach to substance use that it's like, okay, we understand that you've got a problem, but let's do it a little bit safer. So, yesterday I was like, okay, I'm not going to eat, but I am going to engage in some attachment because I really feel like it's a weird day.
That's
So,
hilarious. I love
yeah,
it. I
it was
love
kind
it.
of fun. It
Yeah.
was kind of fun to
Yeah.
watch.
Because
But
during the entire practice, what you do get to really watch your mind.
big time. Yeah. Yeah, you really do. And it's all there, like it just all comes flooding in. Like, um, and last night I slept on the floor. I have like a
I was
sleep.
gonna ask you, yeah, did you sleep
Yeah.
on the floor?
Yeah, I slept
Yeah.
on the floor. I've got a pad. It's sleeping on the floor, but it's not like I'm on hardwood or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
And
You're not trying to harm yourself.
yes, thank you. Yeah, no, that's good. We're not practicing asceticism. That's
Not
right.
at all.
Um, But yeah, my cat does not like when I do things differently.
Mm.
He gets really mad at that. So he likes me in the place where I'm supposed to be. So he was like walking around me all night. He was like
Oh yeah.
downstairs screaming, like, oh my gosh. So I did not sleep well at all. And so when it
Oh.
came time for me to get up for my meditation, um, I got up and then I just like sat at my altar, like not do like I just didn't even do any, like I did some prayers, but they were like half-assed prayers. And um I was like, I can't meditate right now. There's like I know that there's no mind, but there's like not even a relative mind here right now. So like so I ended up not meditating this morning, but did it later.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was it was just kind of fun. Like I feel like there are these little experiments that we can do sometimes, and a little bit of
Yeah.
like a challenge. Like you're doing like maybe it's like a 5K or something where you're like, all right, I'm gearing up for it.
Yeah, totally, totally. I think it's great. The times that I've done it, I have thoroughly enjoyed it. I enjoy it for all the reasons that you pointed out, right? Like
Yeah,
it's just sort of like a good reminder that the way that we structure our lives around comfort and satisfaction, even if it's temporary, like how pervasive that is, right?
so
How it
pervasive.
fills the day, right? Like, oh, taking we've talked about this before, preparing, thinking about food, preparing to, make the food or get the food, eating it and then cleaning up after it
Yeah,
and doing that multiple times per day,
it's
and then
hours.
hours and then like resting in bed, like like if you're sleeping on the floor, that's the part that I think is funny about it is if you're sleeping on the floor, you only get down there when you're ready to go to sleep. There's no like I'm just gonna lay on the floor and like surf the internet or read a book. No, you're on the floor only because you're going to sleep. And when if you have an alarm or whatever in the morning to wake you up, there isn't any desire to just let me just lounge and just lay here on the floor a little bit longer. No, no, get your ass up. It's time to
Yep,
go because the floor is only for sleeping on.
yep, you're done. Yeah,
Over.
it's super funny.
I'm glad that you mentioned the solar eclipse. Can I tell you a funny little thing about the solar eclipse?
Please,
So,
yeah,
all
yeah.
right. So I subscribe to a Reddit community of around Vajrayana practice, and somebody had shared the prayer of Samantabhadra, which I really love. I think it's great, right?
Yeah.
And so, but they'd shared it like in a PDF, and I was actually driving over to the temple to help out with something, and I thought, oh, what I'm going to do. I have this app that reads text, and you could choose anyone. There's all of these voices that you can choose to read the text. And so I picked Snoop Dogg to read the prayer of Samantabhadra,
Hell
which was
yeah.
yeah, it was great. It was great. And nothing quite like it, right? Like like I was thoroughly enjoying it. And this is during the solar eclipse, right? And
Nice.
what was really cool was and this is the reason, no doubt, that the person shared the post is so as you towards the end, it says something to the effect of like, and if you recite this prayer during a solar eclipse, then you are guaranteed to achieve Buddhahood within 3 lifetimes or something like that.
What?
And I was like, woo!
Oh my gosh. That's incredible.
So I
Oh
guess Snoop
man.
Dogg is gonna be I
The
don't know.
AI Snoop Dogg is going to be enlightened in 3 years. I
We
mean, not
have
3
talked
years,
about this
3 lifetimes.
potential, right? Yeah.
Oh, wow. Cool. And maybe yourself too, just by listening. Maybe it'll be like five
Maybe.
lifetimes or
Yeah,
10.
yeah, or maybe 500, who knows? But it's all right. It's okay. It'll take some time, I know. I'm getting
Yeah,
used to this idea that it may take a little while.
I know, right? Yeah, yeah, that one's tough. Well, that's really cool. And we can do it again in 20 years. We'll
Okay.
recite
Yeah.
Tabata at the next eclipse.
That sounds good. That sounds good. Yeah.
Well, should we check out some Lojong? Let's do some mind training. Let's
Let's
do
do
slow work.
let's
The
do what?
slow work of Lojong, right? Lojong
Okay.
slogans. Because I
Okay.
think, it sounds like the Samanta Bhadra prayer during an eclipse is like pretty, like, they're going pretty fast if you're going to be liberated in 3 lifetimes. But I
Yeah.
think Lojong is kind of like, this is where you really get into the nitty gritty of like, we're, we're, we're on the path and it's
Okay.
gradual
Yeah.
change, but it's working. So,
I'm game. Let me share my
yeah,
screen. And
sweet.
then let us use the random Lojong slogan generator that Dirk created that is housed at lionsroardharmacenter.org, the only English language random Lojong slogan generator in the world that we know of.
It's so exciting every time.
Every time.
Whoa. Hey, this really fits
Oh,
into what we're
oh,
talking about, right?
oh, oh, this one's good. All
No.
right. All right, let's
Okay,
do it.
so slogan 28. Give up all hope for results. Fantastic. So we're going to read a little chapter from Charlotte Kyabgum, not chapter, paragraph. This slogan may sound foreign to Western ears. Yes, it does. But it has a long history in Buddhist thinking. The Lojong teachings say that whenever we become obsessed with results, we spend our time trying to manipulate the outcome of our endeavor instead of paying attention to the activity itself. Even though we have no real idea what the result will be, we project a picture-perfect vision of our expectations into the future. He's drilling in. I feel like called
Mm.
out right now. This distracts us from doing the task at hand and usually ends in frustration and disappointment because the imagined result is never the same as the eventual outcome. Thus, we shouldn't concern ourselves with what benefits we're achieving from our mind training, but should simply focus on our practice with sincerity, for how we engage in the practice is what will determine the end result. It's important to have a general notion of what we want to attain, but we shouldn't get too caught up in specifics or we'll waste our time and energy in fantasies.
Ooh, boy, that's a good one.
Woo! I
Oh,
just got
yeah.
burned.
Yeah, Jack, really? You think so? You feel that way?
Yeah, no, I'm totally like, I'm very much a results oriented
Yeah.
human being. And I've had to train to understand like that about the whole like, it's the journey, not the destination, like type thing. Like I get annoyed by that, right? But but yeah, so I've had to train to learn that. And I think it's going to be um, a lifelong journey, if you will,
Yeah.
of learning this one. But I heard a fantastic quote the other day that I know, Lamas also talked about this idea, but one of the nuns from Sravasti Abbey was saying how Thupten Chodron often reminds them, like be satisfied with creating the causes, right? Be satisfied with just doing all this preparatory activity, not the results, right? Like
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
life is so precious in that we have the opportunity to practice and to train and to develop our minds. And we might not see what those results are going to be. We're going
Right.
to see little things along the way, certainly. But yeah, I really like that. Be satisfied with just creating the causes.
That's beautiful. I like that. That's exactly it. Because we can't imagine. I mean, we can try to imagine what the results might be, but if past performance is any indicator of future results, um, it ain't gonna look like anything I imagine, right? Like everything that has transpired, both in a worldly sense and in, in the Dharma, nothing ever actually turns out the way that I imagine it. And it's easy to get distracted by thinking about like, oh, it's going to be like this, it's going to be like that. And why isn't it here yet? Why don't
Yeah,
I have it? Like, why don't I see results? Why don't I see the thing that I imagined? Why does it feel different? Right.
yeah,
And that's not beginner's mind. That's not open to what is. It's actually sort of the opposite of what we're doing here, right? Like it's not a yeah it reminds me of a couple of different things. It reminds me of the notion of spiritual materialism, right? That there is this attainment when the Heart Sutra, for example, tells us there is no attainment nor no non-attainment, right? Like that's not what it's not what it's not. Maybe it's what it's about, but it's not what our daily action is about, right? Like it's really putting in the training, right? Putting in the time and effort, and having some discipline in all of it, and trusting that the results will come. We don't have to
yeah.
force it with our minds. We don't have to think about it too much in advance. Like he says, right? It's important to have a general notion of what we want to attain, right? We don't get a recipe for, bread or something and follow the recipe without thinking like, oh yeah, I'd like to have some bread of that type,
Right.
right? Like that'd be nonsense. Of course, we have some notion, but then while we're baking the bread, we're not thinking like, well, why isn't the salt in the bread? Why isn't this flour? Why doesn't it look like loaf yet?
Right. Why doesn't it just come together?
Yeah,
How does
what exactly, right? That's just nonsense. It doesn't make any sense, right?
that is such a great analogy to use in talking about this Lojong slogan. Because, I think so often we have like magical thinking, right? Where it's kind of like, well, I'm kind of a good person. Things are going to work out okay. Like, I'm just going to let things come to me, right?
Yeah.
But we forget that, like, actually, what we're doing is okay, we've got some good ingredients, but we got to put them together. Like,
Yeah,
we
right.
got to put that effort in for it to come out the way that we want it to. And so yes, we have this precious life where we have, a teacher, we have the teachings, we have so much access, we have translated teachings, all these things.
Yeah.
But are we putting it into practice? Are we really making effort? So I like that a lot. I
Yeah,
remember
yeah.
that bread making
This is
analogy.
yeah, this I love this one. This is I gotta say, I think that this is one of my favorite Lejong slogans.
Yeah.
It
It
really
also,
resonates with me. I
yeah,
think it allows, I think part of it too is that it allow when you're not so focused on the end point, it really does allow you to have some curiosity, some playfulness, and some lightness around the process itself, right? Like, because you're not trying to get, it's not like instant, I'm gonna get that thing right now. You can kind of, like, you can it allows for some experimentation, right? Like, and it allows for some failure too, right? Like, at least for me,
yeah,
I've been really grateful for this notion that it's a gradual path. It's going to take some time, right? It's not going to happen instantly. When I initially got started on my sort of spiritual window shopping, I was looking for instant enlightenment of some sort, big breakthrough sort of thing.
yeah,
And I know many people that's true for them, but it turned out to be such a helpful thing for me to recognize, like, nah, man, it could actually be many lifetimes, and that's okay, right?
yeah.
Like, but keep working at it, keep plugging away, you might get there. Like, you no, not might, you will get there. Just
We'll
keep
get there.
applying
Yeah.
yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, it puts things into perspective a little bit. Um,
Yeah.
I think there's also this there's this thing that really like drew me to this practice of Buddhism, and like a very much like lineage practice of Buddhism that I found attractive was like it sounds like they're saying like give up all hope. Like give up hope. Like it's a little bit I don't know, provocative in a way that I find like really attractive where um yeah, I just feel like when I first started, learning about Dharma, it was kind of like, oh, there's like these really happy, like chill and like vibed out people like Thich Nhat Hanh and Dalai Lama and stuff. And I would have never thought that they would say something like give up all hope, like give up all hope for results, because that sound like if you're not really thinking about it, it kind of sounds like a little bit nihilistic, but it's actually the opposite, right? Because as we know, um, like this desire to create something solid, which I think is what hope sometimes is like this attachment to results, or this kind of creating solidity, is the flip side of nihilism, right?
Yeah.
It's like, and so this type of language is something that really attracts me in a way to the Dharma, to lineage Dharma.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I agree with everything that you said. I think that what's being said, no one is saying that there won't be results,
Right.
or that the results won't be good. I mean, why would anybody pursue any path that they thought wasn't going to achieve good results? That's hence it's good. We know that this is going to lead us in the right direction, but along the way we have to give up all these expectations.
Yeah.
We have to let go of our preconceived notions of what any of this means, right? And our own cherished sort of ideas are, that's the hope, right?
Yeah, for
Because the
sure.
hope itself is an illusion.
Yeah.
Let's not go too far with it, but who is it that's doing the hoping, and what are they hoping for, right? Usually, typically, it's hoping for something for oneself. And
Yeah.
the mind training really is about bending that pattern the other direction.
Right, right. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think so much of what he said here was about that. Like, um, let's not be obsessed, right? Because
Yeah.
obsession is about the self. So yeah,
Mm. Mm.
fantastic. I love it. Thanks,
Mm.
Lojan. Thanks, Dirk,
Yeah. Oh,
as
I
always.
love it. That's so good. So good.
Well, my friend, we're talking about entering the path and refuge tonight. Lions Roar is going to have some new Sangha members coming up on Sunday, some new refuge students, which is so exciting. Um, so yeah, we wanted to talk a little bit about our journeys.
It's like
Um,
attending a childbirth or something.
yeah, totally. I mean, it is. It really is. It's like a whole new dedication and commitment to
Yeah.
life in a different, you're choosing to live life differently. So yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. Hmm.
When did you take refuge, Jack?
I took refuge in February of 2019. So I just had my, or no, end of March 2019. So I had my 5 year last month or just a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Nice. Wow.
I know. I was thinking I need to text all of my refuge siblings and say happy 5th birthday or something.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Well,
think it feels that
happy
way.
belated birthday to
Happy
you.
belated birthday. Yeah. And when was yours?
December 10th, I think 10th, I think either 10th or 11th, but I think December 10th, 2022.
Yeah.
I did the official, so I don't think entering the pass ceremony was available when you took, before you took refuge, was it?
No, it wasn't. No.
No, I'm pretty sure I was at the first one of those, and that was in March of 2022, I believe. And so, yeah, and it was really helpful. So I was
Yeah,
so I'm
tell me about that. What was that like to do that before taking
mm,
refuge?
I was so, like I'd been, yeah, I'd been sort of going around the Dharma Center. I'd been associated with it, like sort of at arm's length, right? And was getting more and more interested, and had been having meetings at Darshan with Lama, and was meditating regularly. And I was like, yeah, I really want to take refuge, but I'm not quite ready. I know I'm not ready for it. And I remember talking to Lama about it once, and then lo and behold, there was this entering the path ceremony, and I was invited to join that. And it was like, hey, it totally spoke to me. I'm a commitment phobe. I really
Yeah,
I have a hard time with commitment. And until I am committed, in which case I'm totally committed. Once I'm,
you're in.
what,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm in. But because of that, it takes a lot for, like I'm sort of weary. I'm like, I'd rather not, because I know that if I'm in, I'm really, really in.
That's
And so,
fair. That is fair, honestly. I think that
yeah.
might even be a better approach than like jumping.
Yeah, yeah,
Right?
maybe so, maybe so. But I was really apprehensive about actually committing, and so this was really, it was right up my alley. And I remember during the ceremony, it was really nice. It was like, you're not taking refuge, you're not becoming a Buddhist, you're not anything. You're really just sort of stating your intention to live with like a good heart, right?
Mm,
Like, but, and this, and allow your curiosity to sort of to develop here, right? Like, that's all. It's just sort of an intention of like pointing yourself in the right direction. That's
yeah.
And I was like, I'm down with that. I could do that. Like, no problem. No one's gonna get mad at me if I bail out on this, right? It's okay. And so then, and that it really did pave the way for me to take refuge later. And I, I still had, oh my God, I had all kinds of doubt and trepidation around taking refuge, but Lama held my hand and
Yeah.
helped me understand it better. The thing that helped me the most, I want to uh, give a shout out and a plug to Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche.
The
He
essay.
wrote, yeah, the essay. So
Mhm.
Matthew Cruz shared with me before I decided to take refuge. He shared this link to an essay called "The Decision to Become a
Mhm.
Buddhist." Is that what it
Mhm.
is?
Yep. Yeah.
And I read it, and it hit me like a bolt of lightning. Then I read it again. I read it again. I don't know how many times I've read that thing, maybe a dozen times or more, and the more that I read it, the more that it resonated. And I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
yes, this is clear. Like, this, I understand what this is saying, what taking refuge is about. And I want that. That's exactly what I'm aiming for. It's a little scary. Yeah, sure.
Mhm.
But,
Mhm.
but no, I think I want this. So that essay, if anybody, to anybody who is listening, if you are interested in what it means to take refuge, or are thinking about it, or if you have taken refuge and you haven't read the essay, basically anybody who hasn't read it, read it. It's
Yeah.
amazing. Really good.
Yeah, and I think that's it really sets the stage, right, for um just how much of a commitment it is. That it's, you don't want to jump in lightly. It's something that when taken seriously will completely transform your entire life. um, and so we should be taking those things really seriously.
Hmm.
And I wonder too if that's also why Lions Roar now has the entering the path um pathway, right? Is that um we want people to be involved and engaged, but not have to make that kind of a commitment yet. Um because the essay really points to just how important it is. And that, if you are feeling that, drive, that spirit of refuge, like um that's beautiful. And but just take it seriously,
Hmm.
and really really meditate on it. So yeah, that essay also really struck me.
Yeah.
um and I was kind of like, okay, I'm game. Like that's how it
That's
felt.
that's funny. It must be a rite of passage at Lions Roar.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
totally.
everyone's sort of like somebody knows somebody and they're like, hey, they need to read this essay.
It's funny. I think I Google searched because I was like, I want to know a little bit more
No
about
kidding.
refuge. And
I
but you would
wonder if maybe you're the one who pointed it out to Matthew and he shared it with me.
I don't know. I don't I think maybe Matthew also had the same impulse as I did. But one thing that I found really helpful too, in the same vein, was that I had asked to speak to a couple Sangha members about what their experience of taking refuge had been. Um,
Smart. Smart.
yeah, yeah. I was like, I want to kind of get the lowdown. I want to hear
Ooh.
some of the grit, right? Like
Yeah, what did you
what's
discover?
going
I
on
didn't
here.
know that you did this. Come on now.
Yeah, well, I asked a Sangha member about this, and she laid it out for me, like kind of what had happened for her and her experience. And it was so helpful because she was just really real about it. And she was like, this is really hard. Like this is the hardest thing that I've done, because it just requires me to look at my life and like what is getting in the way of being this person that I want to be. And so that was, again, it was like this kind of light bulb going off of like, I feel ready to
Yeah.
really work on myself. And not just in a therapeutic way, because I think that's important to think about too, is like, are we going to the Dharma? Are we going to the temple solely for therapeutic reasons? Which is not an incorrect reason, right? Like that's why I showed up to the temple, is that I wanted some refuge from the chaos and stress in my mind and in my life. And so started going to the meditation groups. um but Dharma is separate from psychotherapy. It's separate from this kind of Western ego-centered, really, approach to life. Um and so I had to assess that a little bit. Like, am I just trying to like feel okay within my one life that I'm kind of experiencing here? Um, or am I ready to kind of to move, spread out beyond that,
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, Rinpoche says all the time, this is not a self-improvement project.
this is nothing. Thank Buddha. I was gonna say thank fucking God, but yeah. Uh I super appreciate that reminder,
Yeah. Yeah.
because sometimes if I'm not aware of that, I will get into that mindset, the results oriented mindset. Yeah,
Exactly, right. Again, it's not that the self won't improve.
right, exactly. That's the thing. That's, yeah, that little magnet right
And
there.
like like we've talked about before, I think spiritual materialism or wanting to feel better, that is the impulse for the majority of people who
Yeah,
show up. right? So it's not, I don't want to in any way denigrate that. That's actually an expression of your Buddha nature. You care for yourself and you want to, not suffer anymore. It's just, I think, like what you're saying, Jack, is it's bigger than that.
Yeah. Yeah. We're
Yeah.
thinking lifetimes, we're thinking all beings, you know?
Yep. Yep. Exactly that. Exactly that. So
Yeah.
what were, so I'm glad that you mentioned that. I think that's really good advice, to talk to other people who have taken refuge and get a sense of what it meant to them. I'm curious, what was it that kind of clued you into the fact that you're like, yeah, I know I'm ready. Like, okay, I heard what you said, right? You were ready to kind of make a big substantial or have a big transformation, right? Something to that effect.
Yeah.
But what were like the markers? Had you tried other things before?
Yeah.
What led you there?
I so part of my journey has been that I'm someone who's I'm a little bit impulsive at times. So I can I'm spontaneous. Not so much anymore. Now I'm a little bit more like I like I like things pretty structured. Um but I think I met the Dharma, my spontaneity met the Dharma at a really important time. Um where I kind of just knew. Like when I looked on the Lions Roar website, I was like, this is the place that I want to be. And started going to the meditation, started going to teachings and just really diving in. And so not everyone's going to have that kind of approach. In
No,
fact,
I can
I
I can
really, right, yeah.
no.
And I actually really encourage people not to do that. Right? Like I encourage people like go slow, and at the same time, like I think sometimes you just know. Like I showed up, I met Lama, I started meeting with Lama regularly. I'm disciplined, right? Like that's one of the good karma things that I have is that I was like, I want to do this like program. Like
Yeah.
thinking of it kind of like as a program. And at the time as a self-improvement project, right? And so like that just felt like the program that I wanted to do. It was just right for me. And I think I was just starting to realize how kind of unsatisfactory all the other options were. So like,
Ah, yes.
like
Right.
thinking about like, okay, yeah, I know I want to get a good job. That's cool. Yeah, I like drugs. And it's kind of boring, then they're done. Uh Relationships are cool, but nah, they're whatever. And so it was like all these kind of avenues that I had been like, those were the things, right? Like those were the things that I felt like would give me like what I was looking for, which is like my ideal version of myself.
Yeah.
And all of them just kind of felt a little blah. And I have like I have a good relationship. I have a good job, like I've got these kind of worldly things. But they're not giving me the kind of satisfaction that I really have, I think, always yearned for. And it's why I did drugs, right? Is that I
Yeah.
was like yearning for this really deep experience of the spiritual essence that I've always kind of wanted to tap into. And so I think I tired of all the other options. And then when I showed up at the temple with some spontaneity and some discipline, it was like, this is the place. This is where I'm going to do it.
Mm.
And so it's only deepened from there. And in fact, like, I think of those days as like, I mean, I'm still a baby Buddhist, but that was where I was like a little tiny, tiny baby Buddhist.
You're an embryo.
I was an embryo. And I'm just so grateful for that little, like, still pretty wild being, who like I'm both being tamed and also like totally like energized by this path. It's incredible.
That's, Jack, I just want to thank you. That's beautiful. That gratitude that you have for that self, that being,
Mhm.
who, that little embryonic baby Buddha, right? Who was struggling, and who didn't who had a chaotic mind and didn't know what was going on, or where to figure things how to figure things out, and how somehow all of that led you to this, right?
Right.
I love that. That's heartwarming. I'm going to reflect on that in my next meditation, about
Yeah.
how much I appreciate that person, that being that had the same effect for me, right?
Yeah.
So because it's interesting, because so often our stories are like diametrically opposed, right? So
Yeah.
like in this case, for example, undisciplined, right? I do not have the karmic fortune of being a disciplined person, right? But the thing that is identical, I mean, literally the same, was this: we explored samsara. We explored as many options as we could, right? So in addition to all the things that you said, I also would say I try to find it through philosophy,
Yeah.
right? Different philosophical traditions, and that was nice. That was helpful, expanded my mind and made me look at things from different perspectives, but it never cured the problem, right? Hedonism, all the pleasures, pursuing all the sense pleasures possible. Psychedelics, I know you mentioned drugs, but I'm just saying, like, I really thought, even after I was at Lion's Roar, I was like, oh, if I just, ugh, if I
I
just
know.
go a little bit harder or a little bit further or whatever, I'm going to break through, and I'm gonna, all of a sudden, I'm gonna see the light, and it's good. Oh, it's gonna happen. If I,
Yeah.
and it was very clear, right, that that was not gonna happen. But I was like, I haven't found anything else that was even close, right?
Yeah.
And
Right.
then
Yeah.
and even though I was at Lion's Roar, I was meditating regularly there. I was doing I mean, you want to talk about taming a horse or a wild creature, right? There I was, like in the corral or whatever, like hanging out, and I was like bolting, right, going in all these I was like studying all these weird ass esoteric new age traditions, and going down these various, Hindu or Sikh paths, right? All while, Buddhism was right there. Like I was literally going every single week, right? Like sitting
Yeah.
there, and I was not like reading the website. None of that did it for me. I was just like, these people, no, not this. It's some it's somewhere else, right? And it wasn't until like I really, like, God, I plumbed those depths as much as I could, and was like, it's not gonna happen. This is not it, right? And then it's interesting. I saw this thing on Reddit. I'm gonna give you a quote from some random Redditor. I don't know who they are,
Nice.
but it speaks to what you and I are talking about. They said, in answer to the question, somebody was asking about taking refuge, and this happened earlier this week, and they said, refuge is just a natural consequence of understanding that there is no refuge to be found in samsara anywhere. This means your only option is to take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
even,
Yeah.
I think it really felt that way to me as well, where, in the article that we were talking about by Chugam Trungpa, he says, like, the problem is, in fact, it's not that the problem isn't, that this or this, it's not, we're not saying that a particular Buddhist tradition is the only one and the right one, right? But that this sort of spiritual shopping, right? This experience of like trying to find it by all these different means and not committing to a well-proven tradition or path is the problem, right? How
Yeah.
can we possibly make any progress down any of them if we don't commit? And yet, just like you and I are talking about, we never found a good reason to commit, right?
Mm. Yeah.
Like there wasn't, we never, nothing did it for us. Then all of a sudden, lo and behold, somehow or other, we're like, this is a thing that we can commit to. And I think the thing that did it for me, I don't, it took me a little longer. I have a thick head. But I I think that what struck me was that I could not find any untruth.
Right.
So everywhere else, there's a lot of bullshit,
Yeah.
you know, and a lot of things that sort of don't add up or don't make sense or somehow just like
Yeah.
like I could smell that it or could figure that it wasn't actually true. And I
Yeah.
never, not once, and to this day, I maintain I have not discovered even a single phrase of untruth in Buddhism,
Isn't that beautiful?
right?
That's so beautiful.
It's
Yeah.
amazing.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think you're right there. I feel that we have pretty good bullshit meters, right? Like that's a really good thing to have, because there you're right. There's so much BS in the world, and so many kind of grifters and just like people trying to make money off of our suffering. And
Yeah.
like how grateful I am that like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, I didn't get caught up in a cult or something,
Or
like
did you? No,
I know, right? We already talked about that one time. We
we
talked about
did. We did.
how
I'm
Buddhism is not a
We're
cult.
just cross-referencing
That's right.
another one of our podcast talks.
That was a good one.
Hey, I have a
Yeah.
question.
Yeah.
I have a question for you related. So you've been doing this. You took refuge 5 years ago. Um, and I'm curious. So, your initial idea of what it meant to take refuge was probably something along the lines of the Buddha, Shakyamuni as an example, Dharma, the teachings as the path, and Sangha as community or companionship with like-minded folks. Is that fair assessment?
Fair assessment. And I think also the guru, that I had to make a decision to have a teacher, flesh and
Yeah.
blood teacher.
I
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, Rinpoche himself, when talking about it, I remember, so there is this, we do in fact take refuge in our teacher as well, right? But when it comes to the triple gem, he mentioned not too long ago, he's like, the guru is part of the Buddha gem, right?
Mm,
So it's not something separate.
got
It's
you. Yeah.
from, at least that was my take on it, right? Don't want to put
Yeah.
words in his mouth. But but I'm curious about so yeah, we do want to take refuge in the teacher, right? And so then also in the teachings and then in the community. But I'm just curious, how has that evolved for you? I imagine that you probably take refuge on a daily basis, right?
Yeah.
And obviously, given that there's a familiarity and a depth that proceeds from that. And I'm curious if you could speak about that for a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. Um, well, I think when I first took refuge, there's kind of this like gross level understanding of like, okay, I'm making this commitment. And I have to say, while I jumped in, I still had quite a bit of resistance. Like I knew that this was my path. I knew that this was where I needed to be, but I was still like, these people are weird and like these practices
We are
are
weird.
weird. And I'm just gonna like be here and do it and like think that it's
Yeah.
weird. So
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
right.
I,
So just to clarify, but yeah, there's this kind of like way that it worked at first on a very like gross level on my behaviors. So like taking the precepts, making a decision that I'm going to avoid certain things. I'm going to start a daily meditation practice, right? So these very kind of like concrete ways that taking refuge changed my actual behaviors. Um, and then like there's this kind of like I'm thinking about the last couple years where there was this little bit of a shift in how like my refuge takes place, because I'm like no longer doing the things like I'm not killing insects intentionally. I'm actually I did intentionally kill one insect because they were like flailing and dying, and I don't know if that was the right thing to do, but I did it. So I did that one time. But anyways, I'm not using substances. um but there's these kind of like subtle ways that refuge is kind of like breaking me down. Is how it's almost like water, right? Like and oftentimes that's used as a metaphor in describing the mind and the different stages of meditation. So there's at the beginner level, it's like this rushing, stream going through like some rocks, it's just like tumbling, it's wild. And then the second stage is kind of like this, it's this moving river, it's this large river. So it's a little bit more, quiet and still, but it's still moving. And then the final stage is like it's the river meeting the ocean, right? There's like this meeting of the mind with mind. Um, and I have not, in meditation at least, I haven't moved past like the raging kind of like wild waterfall. But there is this kind of like subtle way that the Dharma is moving in through all of my afflictions.
Hmm.
It's these ways that, like, for example, like it's just very easy example. I no longer feel craving for things like TV. Whereas like a few years ago, I'd be like, honestly, we'd be having this conversation and I'd be thinking like, I get a reward for doing a Dharma thing. So I'm gonna go
Yeah.
watch TV after this. But I don't even feel like that anymore. It just doesn't, like, that doesn't come up. And so that's something that unless we like think about it, like look back and reflect, we're not going to really notice it that much because there's still some gross level ways that I get angry, I get frustrated, I'm not always very kind to people, but it's
Mhm.
these subtle things that if we start to look, and I look back, 5 years ago taking refuge, wow, like it is different. And so refuge in some ways is that it's like I'm taking refuge in my own change process too, like, which is the Dharma like working on me. So that really feels like, I think, how my refuge
Yeah.
has changed a little bit.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
What
Hmm.
have you noticed? I know we've only got a little bit of time, but I'm curious, what things you've
I
seen change with your refuge.
Yeah, I think, two things that come to mind. One of them is similar to what you're saying. There is this sort of feeling of like I that the taking refuge, I began to recognize like what I am taking refuge in, right? So on the one hand, I'm saying on a regular basis, I take refuge in the Guru, the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, right? And then my activities, my behavior, my body, speech, and mind, I demonstrate actually that no, I'm taking refuge in other things, right?
Oh,
And then there, so like I couldn't help but there's this what I'm saying, there's what I'm doing, and they used to be more far apart, but now there's a lot more harmony between the two, so that there's I don't feel as much of like I'm like, no, I recognize I really am taking refuge. And so like there's that aspect of it, which is still a work in progress, as you mentioned, right? But there's there's not as much dissonance between the two, right? I get it. I am taking refuge, right? And I like it.
yeah,
I'm not upset about it.
yeah,
And then the other aspect to it is this great appreciation for not just the Lions Roar Dharma Center Sangha, but for the great community of beings throughout time who have made all of this possible, right? Like that sometimes when like I used to discount that, right? I was like,
yeah.
whatever. But now I'm like, like it's
I know.
breathtaking.
It
Yeah.
is. It is
Mhm.
breathtaking. It's
Mhm.
huge. And I mean, that's one reason why I think our lineage really emphasizes lineage.
Right.
Which, I think if you're coming in as someone who's like outside and just seeing all of it, it could feel kind of like culty and weird and like, why
Yeah.
are we like, you know? And but yeah, it's that we owe everything,
Yeah. Yeah.
to our lineage.
Jack, I'm getting a little teary-eyed just thinking
Yeah,
about it.
I know.
Yeah. Like I'm
It's,
just like, whoa, wow. That's heavy,
it
right?
is. We have a
Mm.
responsibility. We are
Yeah.
that lineage, right? Like
We
we
are
are
not,
the
yeah,
one
that's
to
right.
keep it
That's right.
going.
We're not a,
Big
we're
deal.
not, the Sangha is not separate from us. We are it.
We are it. Yep.
Mhm.
Yep.
Right.
So when we're taking refuge in Sangha, that's part of it.
That's right. Mm, mm.
Ooh, Daniel,
So
this has
good.
been so wonderful. Thank you to all who are listening. And for those of you who are taking refuge or entering the path on Sunday, we love you and we're so excited that you're here.
Ah,
And can't wait to be on this journey with you. Thank you so
so good. Thank you, Jack. Bye, everybody.
much. Bye.